My name is Emanuel. I'm a member at St. Catherine's in Florence, and I'm happy to be with you this morning. Bear with me while I try to figure out how to use this device, but I do want to make sure that everyone who needs this amplification can have it. Let me see if this turns me on, so to speak. Am I on now?
Yes, you are.
I am. Okay, good. Well, the big news is North Carolina has done so well. My son is a graduate, and he's very happy that the Tar Heels are doing so well. But it's also the first weekend of baseball, right? Very important day. You know, someone has said that if the French were ever to play baseball, they would only have left field and no one would be safe. This Sunday is a very special one in the life of the church because we get to hear the confession of a person who doubts in the gospel and the good news of the new life that is ours in Christ. I don't know, but I think many of us and many folks that we know have had doubts about the Christian message. I think many of us are hung up in the doctrines. You know, many folks, well, what does it mean, this Trinity thing? You know, what do we mean by, the virgin birth of Mary's mother? What are these things about? Why, if God is about love, why is there so much hatred in the world? You know, these are very good questions and ones that we need to acknowledge. But here in the story of Thomas, we have him with his own doubts. And we find him locked up in a room, right? He's locked up in a room. And we in our own lives can find ourselves locked up in our own little rooms, can't we? Mm-hmm. We can be locked up in the room of ideology. Which politician is the best one? What political party is correct? I'm locked in that little box, or I can be. Or maybe I'm boxed into the way about maybe my denominational attachments. Maybe I have some kind of idea that being an Episcopalian is somehow more important than living the Christian life, or being a Lutheran, or being a Methodist. You know, we can be in our own little boxes, our own little tribes. And what does that do to us? It focuses us, I think, in on ourselves. Thomas is locked in his own room. He's locked in his own view of reality that says, some things are not possible. Somehow life cannot come out of death. Somehow suffering cannot be redemptive. He's locked in that little room, isn't he? Apart from the person who had given his life, who had given his life for him, and whom he had followed. And in to this closed up box, this closed up system, someone walks through the doors of his own fear, because the disciples were locked up for fear of the Jews. Jesus just walks right into that fear, walks right into our fears, and what does he say? You're such a bad person for not believing in me. No. He says, peace be with you. How many times does he say it? 3 times he says it, lest we forget. Peace be with you. In the middle of the storm and in the middle of our own focused in on ourselves life experience, or focused in on the own death experiences that we have had, loss of loved ones, loss of faith, loss of family members, in the midst of all that, God doesn't care. God just walks right inside of our own box. And he doesn't say, you faithless people. He says, peace be with you. I understand what it means to be locked in a box. Because didn't the Pharisees do that to me? Jesus says, I understand what it's like to be in a box. When folks persecute you for no reason because you were simply speaking the truth in love. Oh yes, Jesus knows what that's like. He knows what it's like to be pushed into a box. But for us, he comes in and opens up the possibility that things that we cannot see, such as love, compassion, peace, and hope, those intangibles are the things that keep us alive, that keep us going, that keep our lives growing. When I forget, Well, what I call it is when I get wrapped around my own axle, you know, I'm focused on me, myself, and I. You know, how can I be comfortable? How can I be free of these things? How can I? When the focus is on me, I'm locked up in my own little box, which is myself. And the way out of that is to say, peace be with you that comes from Christ. And when the peace of Christ lives in our hearts, there's no box we can't break out of. We can be a spiritual Houdini. There's no box that we can't break out of. Because that is the will of God. That we be free from all those things that cage us within ourselves. That cause us to be afraid. Because fear is the thing that is life-killing. More than anything else, it's our fears that keep us from doing those things that we need to do and can do to allow our lives to be fuller and more gracious to others. Yes, we can give ourselves permission to get out and do those things, physical exercise that is good for us. Yes, we can look at the reasons why we are afraid of certain things and take a step back from them and say, why does this concern me? Why am I so fearful about it? Or maybe we can stand back from relationships of family members that we have disagreements with or we don't have communication with and say, what is my part in causing this to happen? How can I reach beyond myself and go beyond myself to help someone else get out of their box? And the way we do that, I think, is to listen to them and consider their story. You know, when I was serving on internship in Atlanta, I was serving in a church that had a ministry for street people, as they are called. And I was not familiar with working around people who were in that situation, you know, who were living on a Social Security check, having been released from the state hospital in Georgia, and just said, we'll give you a bus ticket anywhere you want to go. So these people with no more support than that ended up living in the bushes, you know, in Atlanta. And some of these characters did not look like you and me. They did not look like us. You know, they were pretty scruffy looking. Some of them acted in a little bit strange ways. They might talk to themselves, or they might do interesting things with their arms and their bodies. But you know, once I sat down with them and had a meal with them, and they told me their story, I realized that everyone has a story. Here was an electrical engineer whose life fell out from under him. He was living on the streets. Here was someone who was an accountant, I found out, who had simply given it up and said, this way we live life is for the birds. I'm dropping out. Some of these people had amazing stories. And because of that, I try not to look at people on the surface and judge them until I've heard their story, until they have heard my story. So I want to get out of that box of pigeonholing other people. And in doing so, I set myself free as well, to remember that each person has a story. Now, the disciples had a story, to be sure. Here was a master who had taught them that I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the bread of life. Drink my blood, and you shall know freedom. The truth shall set you free. This is the story that they heard from their master, and they saw him live out these things in his life. He spoke the truth. He gave himself beyond himself. He stepped out of his own box. He was God, but he didn't count his equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself of his own ego. Said there's more to life than me just having fun and meeting my own personal needs. He realized that the world needed something much greater, much larger than mere physical sustenance. They had a story, and the person that told it to them was trustworthy. Stepped into the middle of their own distress, their own darkness, and brought them peace. A peace that passes all understanding, that invites us to let go of whatever it is that we use to bind ourselves and to find that freedom that befits the children of God.